Hey folks, today we're going to be talking about one of the most important investment topics in Kingshot, hero gear. It has a massive impact on your account progression, requires rare resources to develop, and can be costly to respec if you get it wrong. Given its importance, there are a lot of guides out there that discuss hero gear in depth, and while many of them are directionally helpful, they all suffer from the same core challenges. So today, my goal is to push the boundaries of thinking as it relates to Kingshot hero gear and attempt to set a new standard in optimizing your hero gear investments. No small task. To make things easier, I'm going to break up this video into 4 parts. First, we will discuss the fundamentals of how hero gear actually works, so we're all starting at the same point. Then, I'll summarize the conventional wisdom of hero gear investment. Next, I'll identify some of the limitations on that conventional wisdom. And finally, I will introduce a new framework and associated tool to break through those limitations. Let's dive in. You will encounter hero gear very shortly after you start playing Kingshot. And there are many different tiers of gear, but even as a free-to-play player, you'll very quickly begin outfitting your heroes with purple and orange or mythic gear. Up until mythic gear, it's actually pretty straightforward. You get experience in the form of items or other gear that you can consume, and you level up your best pieces on your best heroes through what is known as enhancement. And you can get all of this experience back freely, so there's really no risk. However, once you start working with that orange mythic gear, and reach level 20 town center, as well as gear level 20, you can begin to use forgehammers to do mastery forging. This is a separate leveling system for mythic gear, and provides a multiplicative bonus to the gear stats based on the mastery level. And one of your early game goals should be to outfit your 3 main heroes with mythic gear to advance your overall account progression. And if you're a spender and it's important for you to be competitive in arena mode, you can build out mythic gear for your top 5 heroes, but the biggest return on your account progression will come from improving your top 3 heroes in expedition mode. And the most reliable way to get this mythic gear as a free-to-play player is to purchase it every week with arena tokens. Unlike gear experience, forgehammers cannot be returned risk-free. There is a 50% penalty on what you get back if you mastery reforge, so you need to be especially careful about how you use them to begin with. And finally, as you get later into the game, red gear will unlock. To get red gear, you need to upgrade a mythic gear to level 100 enhancement and level 10 mastery. Then you consume 2 additional mythic gear pieces to ascend that gear piece and open up entirely new progression levels. This will require additional experience, and every 20 levels, you will unlock what's known as an imbuement bonus. These milestones provide massive bonuses but require a super rare resource, known as mithril, as well as additional mythic gear to be consumed. You also need 1 additional mastery level to pass each imbuement stage gate. So a fully maxed out piece of gear will be red with 20 mastery levels and 200 experience levels, although it will show up as plus 100 ascended levels in game. If you're not spending, it will take you quite a while to get 1 of these, let alone 4 for each of your top 3 heroes. Therefore, it becomes super important to prioritize your hero gear investment. While the mechanics of hero gear are simple, the art of upgrading is the real challenge, since you need to make a lot of long-term strategic choices that are dependent on combat mechanics that are not really well explained in game. And accordingly, there are a lot of guides out there that do a decent job of giving directional guidance for how to progress through investing resources into hero gear. And the conventional wisdom across all of these guides goes something like the following. First, build 1 set of each type of hero gear: infantry, archer, and cavalry. You will transfer this to your strongest heroes as you build new generations of those heroes. And then it's usually ineffective to build duplicates of these gear pieces, since most of the direct return on investment comes from your primary expedition team. If you have some extra orange or purple gear lying around, then throw it on your extra heroes, for use in arena teams, or as extra teams in Mystic Trials and Tri-Alliance. But don't invest too heavily in building that gear, and certainly do not spend hammers on it. Second, prioritize improving the gear with the stats that will have the most value based on the best understanding of combat mechanics. The exact prioritization order may shift slightly from guide to guide, but usually it's something like infantry health at the top, followed by archer lethality, followed by cavalry lethality, infantry lethality, archer health, and finally cavalry health. Third, there's usually some proposed step-by-step order in which you're supposed to increase the gear. For example, bringing high priority pieces to level 80 or 100 and mastery level to 6 or 10 or something like that before working on any of the lower priority pieces. But also don't neglect those lower priority pieces entirely, so put a little experience in them to get the quick wins. And finally, when it comes to red gear, certain pre-prescribed paths are proposed to hit the imbuement buffs in an ideal order that rewards the right stats first, given how challenging the investment is at that level. And again, it's not that this is inherently bad advice. I would actually say it's quite accurate and helpful. However, there are some blind spots. First, this guidance is built on a set of beliefs about the relative importance of each of these stats. And the background assumptions about those stats are not always so clearly stated. Since I started playing Kingshot about 8 months ago, I've seen the community proposed damage formulas go through no less than 3 major revisions, each one changing the relative importance of specific stats, and without any such confirmation by the developer, it's possible we may see more changes as testing continues by the community. We've also seen how the combat meta can shift quite a bit. In the early hero seasons, archers were the primary damage dealer and cavalry were always on the short end of every formation. However, with Generation 4 hero abilities, an entire formation without archers is now possible. That would have been unthinkable prior and goes to show just how much these helpful pathways can change as perceptions of the stats themselves can change in this constantly evolving game. And the second major blind spot in conventional wisdom in existing guides is that it relies on heuristics. That is, simplified shortcuts that do a good enough job of trying to express something which is far more complex. So let me give a more specific example. Almost everyone who understands combat in this game would agree that infantry health should be near the top priority, meanwhile cavalry health should be the bottom. And this is due to a fundamental way combat works in this game. The only way cavalry are actually taking any damage is if all the infantry have been defeated. So you should instead keep the infantry up longer to keep more troops alive. And if cavalry is taking damage, so the belief goes, you've basically already lost the battle. Unless the same is true for your opponent and their cavalry are also taking damage at the same time. So that means there might be a situation in which cavalry health is the determinant factor in battle, but it's unlikely. However, you still should have some investment in it, I guess. And herein lies the problem these guides try to solve. Obviously, infantry health is far more important, but how much more? So now when we consider there are diminishing returns to investing in gear, it brings the issue into focus. For the same 9,300 experience points it takes to bring an infantry gear from level 198 to level 199, you could take a piece of cavalry health gear from level 0 to level 51. That's over a 20% increase to cavalry health. Now I know cavalry health isn't as valuable as infantry health, but surely it's not 20 times less valuable than the 1% extra infantry health you would get per level. So then what guide makers generally do is create some sort of heuristic, like get the cavalry health piece to level 40 for easy levels and then stop. Or maybe always keep this piece 40 levels behind that piece. And that's an understandable compromise because the math to sort this all out would be wildly complex and change based on each player's historic investment into mastery levels on those same pieces due to the multiplicative effect. In order to actually optimize this to last mile accuracy, you need to do a ridiculous amount of math that takes into account your current hero gear position, all the benefits for each stat type for each troop from each type of hero gear, numeric assumptions about the relative value of each of these stat types in relation to each other, and an understanding of the entire spectrum of costs for each piece compared to the resources you can invest. Surely no one would be crazy enough to actually do this, right? Right? Well, folks, I have some news for you. A couple months ago, I connected with one of my channel members, ZBrave. He's a data scientist in real life, and we've been banging our heads against this challenge ever since. And before I introduce the results of that effort, I want to thank ZBrave as well as the rest of my Sloth Squad members for their continued support of my channel. Check out the link below for more information on how to join, as well as other efforts and how you can support my channel. So again, we had two real problems to solve: the heuristic problem and that one-size-fits-all problem. And folks, I'm super excited to unveil a tool that addresses both of these to advance the standard in optimizing the investment of your hero gear. KingshotOptimizer.com. By the time you watch this video, the website will be available as an open beta that you can go to for free and figure out how to invest smarter in your hero gear with the resources that you have. And I'm going to walk you through how to use it. And if we step into the hero gear tool, and yes, we are planning more, you will see a prompt for a profile to choose along with the corresponding stat weights underneath. And we have pre-populated these profiles based on both qualitative interviews with Kingshot theory crafters, as well as quantitative modeling based on various sensitivities relating to the stats and proposed damage formulas. So we have different profiles, for example, such as an early game growth profile suitable for most new players who are looking to accelerate the tempo of their account in a way that allows them to get direct return on investment for their hero gear, typically through PvE mechanics. This favors infantry for Vikings and Mystic Trial, as well as archer lethality for Bear Hunt over cavalry troop stats. It combines the intersection of various game mechanics while also acknowledging which stats work well for which troop type roles. We also have an early combat profile suitable for players who are more interested in combat effectiveness over immediate return on investment of resources via PvE mechanics. This playstyle nods to the 50-20-30 combat formation that's more prevalent in the early game. It assumes that the player will supplement suboptimal resource gains with spending. In exchange for that, they get greater combat power for influencing PvP battle outcomes and their server dynamics. And there's other ones in here too that focus more on later game future-proofing against changes in meta or allowing for the equivalent weighting of stats. And there's even an option for you to enter in your own custom weights if you disagree with our assessment or want to theory craft a bit yourself. You can read more details about them on the Build Profiles page. It is our hope that with continued community feedback, we can refine these build profiles to represent the various goals people are building towards, and even incorporate new ones as Kingshot continues to evolve. And that's the most important thing after all. Once you have the relevant weighting of how these stats compare to each other, it just becomes a really complex optimization problem. And this is why we like to think of this tool as a hero gear investment optimizer. It tells you mathematically the most efficient way to get to the goal you set, but we also want to acknowledge that players will have different goals based on their spend levels and kingdom age. These next two options are only relevant for players dealing with red gear. We allow the user to select a red gear imbuement factor. It translates the relative value of the attack and defense bonuses of red gear imbuement to health and lethality bonuses from that gear. We recommend keeping it at 1 unless you have a different belief on their relative importance in one of the proposed damage formulas. And the other option is about choosing how comfortable you are with putting experience into red gear before having enough for an imbuement milestone. Since you cannot reforge experience out of red gear, this is a trade-off between getting more stats for every bit of gear experience in your bag versus preserving the option value to change into another profile at a later point. Then these next inputs we provide are for resources in your bag, such as experience, hammers, mithril, and extra mythic gear. To simplify things, we didn't include fields for all of the extra gear you'll consume. Just put it into a piece of non-red gear, and our optimizer will help you allocate it better with your free reforge. Next, you can input your actual gear levels and mastery levels. We only allow epic gear or better to be input in the fields to reduce the noise, but if you have lesser gear than epic, just use epic as it makes little difference in your allocation versus a piece of rare gear, for example. Just keep in mind that rare gear wouldn't be able to go to as high a level as epic, but you'll shortly will switch over into epic or better anyway with a little bit of time spent playing the game. And lastly, there's an option on whether or not you want the optimizer to suggest reforging experience in your gear to optimize your stats. We recommend keeping this enabled since it's free in-game, and we'll never recommend reforging mastery levels due to the 50% forgehammer loss. Instead, the optimizer is programmed to work with you to correct suboptimal hammer allocations over time via future investment. And once all your inputs are finalized, simply scroll down and hit the optimize button. This will run a greedy algorithm that will provide you with a comprehensive personal upgrade plan, perfect for KVK. It tells you what you should do with each individual piece as far as upgrading and reforging if relevant. And it will show you the total stat gain across each of the individual pieces and across troop types for each stat as a whole. Please note that we show both the total stat gain as displayed in-game, as well as the weighted stat gain based on the build profile you selected that values each stat differently. And finally, if you scroll further to the bottom, you'll see which resources were used and which resource is your current bottleneck, in case you're trying to stockpile more resources for big KVK upgrade. Now you know what you need more of. And if you're ever unsure of the assumptions behind the scenes that our algorithm is running, you can always check out the References tab, which includes all of the relevant data tables in the game that we sampled, as well as links to other helpful data sources online that we corroborated against. So let's look at 3 case examples of the tool in action and explain the principles that the optimizer is driving. In my version of the tool, I'm quickly loading test data to show how this all works. Let's start off with a hypothetical early game player who put a few investments into their gear and then quickly realized they had no idea what they were doing. Then they started saving a bunch of forgehammers and experience because they knew they were valuable, but felt the pressure of being uncertain about where they should be best used. In this example, their fearful saving has accumulated 50,000 experience points and 500 forgehammers. And we're going to be leaving Reforge on to help them get back the underutilized experience points while making the most of their pre-existing forgehammer usage. So now we run it, and the optimizer recognizes a 37.5% gain in raw stats from a mix of reforging and using all of that potential experience and forgehammers that was sitting in their bag. However, it's actually a 57.3% improvement to the weighted version of the stats that we selected in this build profile. That translates into better bear hunt performance, leading to more forgehammers. That also means better mystic trial performance, leading to a permanent increase in income of rare materials. More specifically, the optimizer correctly identified that the player was overinvested in cavalry stats and clawed back some of that experience. Importantly though, it didn't take all of it back and set the pieces to 0, but rather recognized some cheap wins on those stats should remain and balance it against the earnest progression in infantry and archer stats. It distributed the mastery levels across multiple pieces, and it used all of the forgehammers as well as 99.9% of the experience, making sure that the player got the full value of all the materials sitting in their bag on the right stats. Importantly, it looked at the multiplicative impact of using experience and forgehammers on the same piece. We talk about this in the How It Works section and how the total improvement is greater by looking at these synergies when they're available. Now this early game player can progress forward with peace of mind that they are making the best decision from their personal upgrade plan, and query the optimizer whenever they get more resources in the future. They also can get a preview to see the potentially next most valuable upgrade, such as taking infantry gloves to mastery level 6 when they get 60 more forgehammers. Now our next case example is still going to be a bit of an earlier game player, but they're a bit more of a spender and are interested in gaining a bit of an advantage in PvP combat. They have plenty of experience from buying packs, and in fact already have enough that they have each of their pieces of equipment at level 100, and still have some more experience sitting in the bank. They also have purchased 800 forgehammers that are ready for use, along with some extra mythic gear and mithril that they have sitting around. Now if they had followed conventional wisdom or wanted to chase the shiny red gear, they might be tempted to dump a bunch of forgehammers into their favorite pieces of infantry health gear and start upgrading as deep into red territory as possible. And while that would increase their strength, there is a more efficient option. The optimizer found that even though they have the materials to do such an upgrade, a better use of those hammers would be to take only one of the infantry health pieces to level 120 red gear for that defense boost, and instead raise the mastery level of some lethality gear for archers due to the better return per forgehammer. It also recognized that some of that experience could be taken out of the cavalry health gear in order to help get the infantry gloves to level 120 for the imbuement bonus of defense, which is where the real power of red gear lies. Otherwise, they would have been bottlenecked with not having enough experience to make that jump. Without this personalized upgrade plan, this player may have made the mistake of putting both infantry health pieces to red gear and not having enough ability or resources to get either of them up to their first stat gain bonus. But the optimizer found a better return in the meantime while they wait to accumulate more resources, thus helping them more effectively compete immediately for PvP combat. And here's a final case example I'm going to show you, which is actually the real data from one of our optimizer stress testers that had 8 out of their 12 pieces already at red gear, and the remaining pieces are all at experience level 100 with varying degrees of mastery. Now we're going to be using the Generation 4 weight profile, which converges the growth and combat profiles and reflects the new realities of a meta that is in flux and requires future-proofing by not only pumping infantry stats, but also balancing investments between cavalry and archer lethality a bit more evenly. At this level, the player starts to become bottlenecked more by imbuement levels than by experience. But then once the imbuement level is passed, a massive demand for additional experience opens up. So one helpful trick to solve this pendulum effect is what we call experience banking, and the tool supports it. Experience just sitting in a bag is a waste as far as the optimizer is concerned, but the challenge is that experience sitting in red gear cannot be reforged out if there's a change in meta. However, there are certain gear pieces, such as cavalry health pieces, that are so deprioritized due to their weights that they're not really proposed to advance to red gear until very late in the optimization journey. So instead, they sort of sit at level 100 and still provide some small benefit with the experience that's there versus in the bag, but they are also able to readily be reforged down when that experience is needed to hit a new imbuement milestone. Then the player can withdraw that experience and combine it with whatever else is sitting in their bag in order to raise the prioritized gear's imbuement level. But in this optimizer result, without experience reforge on, the optimizer recognizes that there's a potential for 16.1% weighted stat improvement while consuming all of the experience, forgehammers, mythic gears, and mithril. But as you can see, some of this is left over even with the 2 imbuement levels and ascending new pieces of archer health gear. However, if we go up and check that reforge box and take advantage of the experience banking, the result is very different. Now we get a 17.2% improvement because the optimizer is reclaiming that experience from the cavalry equipment, and even a piece of unascended archer health gear. More importantly, it now provides just enough experience to bring the infantry helm all the way up to level 160 imbuement to grab that juicy 30% infantry defense bonus on the lethality gear. Now, if the player didn't have a tool like this to show them that they had enough experience to get there, they would have run the risk of putting some of the experience into red gear to see if it can go far enough, but not being able to reforge out if they were wrong, and thus may have missed out on a better opportunity to optimize their gear than some of the more low-hanging fruit that was shown without the ability to reforge the experience. And even further, if we look at resource consumption, we can see that the full spread of resources has been balanced and consumed much more efficiently and led to a better overall account progression for this player. As a side note, you'll notice we really don't factor in the conquest stat bonus imbuement levels. This is because, quite frankly, they do not meaningfully help advance your game in a way that provides a significant return on investment. Conquest and Arena are such a small part of combat that it would be reckless for us to have the optimizer prioritize such important and expensive investment decisions and resources on them. They should be thought of as a nice ancillary side benefit to help you rank a little bit better in Arena, but not as a reason to shape your overall hero gear journey. So hopefully these examples help illustrate the power of what we built, and this is only the initial beta. We have plenty of plans to continue building a more robust suite of tools, not only to solve this optimization problem, but potentially others. And we're also looking at building more advanced tools for theory crafters, such as disaggregated mastery and experience optimization, as well as sensitivity analyses to help understand how future-proof investments are against changes in stats caused by a shifting game meta. But for now, please use this initial beta as much as you'd like. Strategize for how you'll use your resources in KVK, try to break things and let us know if you have by reporting any bugs, and let's try to build something together that can really help the Kingshot community. And on that note, thanks again for tuning in and being part of such a great player community. Please feel free to ask questions and leave feedback on the tool in the comments here on this video if that's easier. And be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to stay up to date with the latest videos on the channel. Thanks again for watching, happy optimizing, and happy gaming out there.